Meghan I almost understood. She's a Hollywood B-list to be charitable actress. She was a social climber. Her whole thing is about image, so I can see why she's so easy to upset when it comes to bad.
What if I told you Harry and Meghan's greatest enemy isn't the tabloids that torment them? It's their own neurological wiring, hijacked by a media addiction so severe, it's destroyed every relationship they had. Tom Bower didn't just expose their lies. He revealed the psychological trap they can't escape, needing the very attention that's killing them.
But Harry is, he was the grandson of the king. He's a prince. I was surprised at how much, according to your reporting, he follows the media and follows social media and cares about every word that's written.
The real battlefield here isn't public relations or palace politics. It's dopamine regulation and narcissistic supply. Tom Bower identifies something crucial. Harry's intelligence deficit combined with trauma creates the perfect storm for manipulation. When someone lacks cognitive complexity but craves validation, they become controllable through attention mechanics. Meghan didn't seduce a prince. She identified an addict and became his dealer. The product wasn't love, it was relevance.
Well, I think Harry is a very complicated person because he's not very intelligent and undoubtedly remains damaged by the early death of his mother, Diana. The
strategic miscalculation both made was believing they could control their supply. They thought leaving the monarchy meant choosing their media exposure. But addiction doesn't work that way. Every Netflix deal, every Oprah interview, every lawsuit isn't strategy. It's compulsion. They're not fighting for privacy. They're fighting withdrawal. The palace understood this immediately. Why battle someone who's already destroying themselves through dependency?
But then he became criticized, firstly because he became drunk in public, then he wore a Nazi uniform at a party, then he was wearing absolutely nothing in the nude at the party in Las Vegas, and he couldn't cope with the criticism.
Consider the Diana parallel Bower exposes. Diana orchestrated her media coverage, texting photographers her location, managing which journalists got access. She wasn't hunted. She was hunting attention. Harry witnessed this pattern throughout childhood. His mother's media manipulation became his normal. Now he's recreating it with Meghan, except social media accelerated the addiction cycle from days to minutes. Every Instagram post needs immediate validation. Every article requires instant response. The feedback loop tightens until there's no gap between stimulus and need.
Because in his view, he is a target. And it didn't help that his telephones were hacked by News International, Rupert Murdoch's group here in London. And so he became hypersensitive and blamed the media for the crashes of his relationships.
Here's where it gets dark psychologically. Meghan researched Harry meticulously before their first meeting. She knew about Africa, philanthropy, his mother's death, every psychological button to push. This wasn't romance. This was targeted acquisition of a vulnerable asset. Harry admits on the first date she was the one. That's not love. That's activation of pre-programmed trauma responses. She played Diana's role perfectly because she studied the script. The conscious manipulation of unconscious wounds represents strategic genius.
I had always looked at it more as, she landed this prince. That's what she was out for. We know that she was hunting for someone of wealth, of notoriety in Great Britain, and she landed, the biggest you could land. But it worked the other way too. He was feeling irrelevant. She comes along. She's a, somewhat well-known person, or at least that was his impression.
The cruel genius of media addiction is it requires escalating doses. First, it's dating rumors, then engagement announcements, then tell-all interviews, then memoirs revealing family secrets. Each hit needs to be bigger to achieve the same high. That's why Harry's writing about frostbite and Taliban kills. He's not sharing truth. He's chasing dopamine through shock value. The audience becomes tolerance building. Yesterday's scandal becomes today's normal. Tomorrow requires something even more extreme.
You're absolutely right. I mean, what I discovered was, of course, that she was hunting for a man in England from 2013 onwards, when her marriage had crashed and she couldn't find anyone in Canada at the time. And she wanted wealth and she wanted fame.
Tom Bower's observation about Harry's limited time before George overtakes him reveals the temporal panic driving everything. Addicts always fear their supply running out. Harry knows his relevance has an expiration date. Every year George ages, Harry's importance diminishes. This creates desperate behavior. The lawsuits, the book deals, the constant revelations. It's not strategy. It's someone scrambling for fixes before the dealer cuts them off. The countdown to irrelevance drives increasingly erratic decisions.
Meghan is. It's easy to dislike her. But the point about her is that in her own terms, she is an astonishing success. She came from nothing, not a very successful actress. She had no money. She had no future after the Suits series in Canada. And suddenly she's an international star with quite a lot of money. And of course, in her terms, that's a great success.
The financial collapse amplifies the addiction cycle exponentially. Spotify called them grifters. Netflix won't renew. Hollywood's backing away. But instead of recognizing market rejection, they double down on exposure. This is textbook addiction behavior. When one source dries up, frantically seek others. The problem is there's finite demand for victim narratives. They're exhausting their supply by flooding the market. Economic laws apply even to attention economics.
I mean, Meghan is one of the first to manipulate the press. She claims she wants privacy, but she's working press opportunities every day. I mean, she'd love to see herself on the cover of Vanity Fair.
Nope.
There's no reason in the world they would have ever put her on that cover had it not been for the fact that she was dating Harry. But she pretended like she had accomplished something wonderful as a philanthropist that would land her on the cover.
Meghan's manipulation of Harry exploits his specific vulnerabilities systematically. Bauer notes, Harry's hypersensitivity to criticism stems from phone hacking trauma. He can't distinguish between legitimate critique and persecution. Meghan weaponizes this paranoia, convincing him all negative coverage equals abuse. She's not protecting him. She's isolating him from reality checks. Classic dealer behavior. Make the addict dependent only on you for interpretation of reality. Control the lens through which they see the world.
Harry likes to portray Meghan as Diana, but they've got absolutely nothing in common at all. Because Diana, for all her criticism of Charles, was always absolutely loyal to the Queen and completely loyal to the monarchy. And although obviously she thought about herself in terms of her life, she would never put herself above the monarchy, which of course was the downfall of Meghan in Britain, that she wanted to be number one. She didn't want to be part of a team. And they play the Diana card to suggest that when she is criticized, her fate will be the same as Diana's. But I think most people have seen through that now. They were shocked at the beginning and sympathetic. But I think to that extent, the sympathy is running thin.
The comparison shopping between Diana and Meghan reveals the strategic difference. Diana maintained loyalty to the institution while manipulating media. She understood the symbiotic relationship. Meghan wants dominance without reciprocity. She demands attention while rejecting the system that provides it. This is why Diana remained beloved while Meghan becomes toxic. One fed the ecosystem, the other just consumes. The public instinctively recognizes givers versus takers. What's particularly brilliant about Bauer's analysis is showing how their victimhood narrative requires constant media engagement. You can't be persecuted by something you ignore. Every lawsuit, every complaint, every interview proves they're actively participating in what they claim traumatizes them. The public sees through this contradiction. That's why sympathy transformed into mockery. People recognize performative suffering versus genuine pain. Hollywood's rejection isn't about moral judgment, it's about ROI. Entertainment industry understands attention economics better than anyone. They recognize when someone's hit their peak supply and entered decline. Meghan and Harry aren't being canceled. They're being recognized as depreciating assets. Their addiction makes them unreliable. Their desperation makes them unprofitable. The market delivers verdicts through profit and loss. The template this creates for modern celebrity destruction is chilling. Identify someone with trauma and cognitive limitations. Provide initial validation through media attention. Create dependency on that attention for identity. Then gradually restrict supply while they desperately chase it. They'll destroy themselves publicly while you maintain distance. It's psychological warfare through dopamine manipulation. The victim becomes their own executioner. Future celebrities studying this collapse will recognize the warning signs. When privacy campaigns coincide with documentary deals. When victimhood becomes brand identity. When every interaction requires media documentation. These aren't strategies. They're symptoms of terminal addiction. The cure requires complete withdrawal, but their entire identity depends on the disease. Recovery means accepting irrelevance. The palace's strategy of silence becomes even more brilliant through this lens. They're not ignoring Harry and Meghan. They're forcing withdrawal. No responses mean no supply. No engagement means no fix. They're making them go cold turkey in public. The resulting desperation, the books, the interviews, the escalating claims, just proves the addiction exists. Silence becomes the most aggressive form of warfare. The neurological mechanics matter here. Dopamine doesn't respond to achievement. It responds to anticipation of achievement. Every article about them, positive or negative, triggers the same neural pathways. They're not seeking good press. They're seeking any press. The brain can't distinguish between fame and infamy when it's desperate for stimulation. This explains why they create controversies. Negative attention still feeds the addiction. Tom Bower's revelation about Meghan being a serial fabulist takes on new meaning through addiction framework. Lies aren't just deception. Their dose increases. Each fabrication needs to be bigger to generate the same response. The racism claims, the suicidal thoughts, the title controversies, these aren't just manipulations. They're escalating doses of a drug that requires constant increase. The lies get bigger because the high gets smaller. The isolation strategy Meghan employs mirrors drug dealer tactics perfectly. Cut off alternative support systems. Make the addict dependent on single source. Reinterpret all outside intervention as threat. Harry's estrangement from William isn't just family drama. It's removal of reality checks. Every friend lost, every family member alienated, removes someone who might interrupt the cycle. Dealers know isolated addicts are controllable addicts. In examining Harry's intelligence deficit that Bower highlights, we see vulnerability multiplication. Lower cognitive function means fewer defense mechanisms against manipulation. Complex thinking provides buffers against simplistic narratives. Without it, black and white thinking dominates. Media becomes evil. Meghan becomes savior. Nuance disappears. This isn't criticism of disability. It's recognition of exploitation. The victimhood currency they trade in has diminishing returns. First interview generated sympathy. Second, generated interest. Third, generated suspicion. Fourth, generated mockery. They don't understand why the same story stops working. Addiction blinds them to market saturation. They're selling the same product to increasingly skeptical buyers. The victimhood well runs dry, but they keep returning to it. In your own life, this reveals how modern validation systems create dependency. Social media likes, professional recognition, relationship attention. We're all susceptible to addiction cycles. The difference is, most people have cognitive buffers and reality checks. Remove those, add trauma and manipulation, and you get Harry and Meghan. They're not cautionary tales about fame. They're warnings about vulnerability exploitation. The universal lesson transcends celebrity culture entirely. In any relationship where someone needs validation more than connection, manipulation becomes possible. The person who controls attention supply controls the relationship. Harry thinks Meghan saved him from irrelevance. She actually imprisoned him in permanent performance. He's not living. He's generating content for dopamine hits. What Tom Bower really exposed isn't royal scandal. It's the architecture of psychological dependency weaponized for profit. Harry and Meghan aren't victims of media persecution. They're addicts whose dealer convinced them the withdrawal symptoms are attacks. Until they recognize the addiction, they'll keep destroying themselves in public, mistaking the disease for the cure. The tragedy isn't their fall from grace, it's their inability to stop falling.